happens. Zoom is preparing to live stream the webinar. Veronica, what we're going to do is we're going to kind of start off with just talking about a little bit about your history, how you've influenced Roxy.
She doesn't even know me.
I think Roxy should tell me that.
Okay, saying, hang on. Something's, okay.
I'm watching the sun dip behind the
okay, so hold on a second. It says this video is live now. I think that's it. Boom, we're live.
Yeah, I'm double checking it because I'm not seeing it update here on my phone, which is concerning me.
Okay, so
with your permission, what I'm going to do, I'm going to switch my video off so you can go ahead and go live, but I'm going to run up and get a backup because when this sun dips behind here, I'm probably going to disappear.
right. Okay, great. We'll see you. We'll see you in a few minutes. I'm going to just click your camera off. There we go.
We are.
We are live. Okay.
Yes.
All right. Hello.
Okay.
Hello, everybody. I am Love Coach Scott Katamas, and I am with the irrepressible Roxanne De Palma and our amazing, wonderful, she does everything, Debbie Garcia. And soon we have a really special guest, Veronica Monet is going to be joining us. And so we're going to be talking about what does it mean to be sex positive. And it's funny because one of the things I was going to do kind of to start off the show was I was looking for some pictures of Roxy today to just kind of make it interesting and, do a little montage. And oh my God, I found pictures of Roxy that I'm very curious about. So we're going to play a little game for about 5 minutes. What I'm going to do is when I flash this picture up on the screen, Roxy, I want you to be honest about your very first thought or feeling. Like when you see this, what's your first thought or feeling? And then I'm going to put the spotlight on Roxy. So your first thought or feeling when you see this, and then maybe a little story about it. All right. Does that sound good?
Okay.
All right, here we go. It's going to be, we're going to play a little bit if we can, how we can freak Roxy out a little. Well, I don't know if we'll freak her out, but all right. So here's the first one.
Oh, that was fun. That was a fun photo shoot.
Yeah.
To be dead fucking honest, I got spoiled. I did my first ever suspension with a man named Janos, and I love Janos and his wife Sarah. And he did a suspension. That photo shoot in particular was not the suspension shoot we did. And Janos works silently, quietly. We have a really deep, long history together. And Vixen Photography, who does really epic boudoir photography, had been wanting to do a shibari shoot with me for a long time, and a suspension shoot in particular. So Janos and I did this shoot, and it was this intoxicating, silent. He and I were like in the moment of like we actually did a scene together. And we communicated with our eyes. Again, we know each other really well, so we didn't need to have verbal safe words with each other, but we had them just in case. And the pictures that came out of that photo shoot, you can feel the energy behind them, and like they're exceptional. So fast forward to the photo shoot of the picture you just shared was also with Vixen Photography. Love Scott Saw, he does amazing work. And he had hired someone else to do shibari and suspension. And so the guy who did it, it wasn't us being in a flow energetic together. I mean, the guy who did it was super sweet, super respectful, very skilled and talented, but it felt bare bones to me, honestly. Right. And I had fun, but when I see that picture, all I think about is the suspension shoot that I did with Janos, and I long for that. Because
now I'm wondering if this photo here is from the one that you were talking about that you really enjoyed.
Yes, that one. That was in the afterglow. I was intoxicated in that picture, not on drugs or alcohol, but because Janos and I were in this dance together. And it was a non-sexual experience, so to speak. I think a lot of people assume that if you're getting tied up that there's sex involved or sexuality. And maybe there was sensuality in the energy, but it wasn't a sexual session. And that's the
There's, you know what? I found one other one from that photo shoot, which I'll see if I can pull up a little bit later. All right, well, let's try something else different that I discovered. In fact, of all the photos I saw today, looking through your history, this is the one that surprised me the most because I knew nothing about this chapter of your life.
Oh, take that down. Take that down. Okay. One of my really dearest best friends, whose name I won't say right now, because I don't know if she wants to be public about it.
I gotta put it back up a little bit though, for us to know what you're, you know. See,
Okay,
I so quickly responded.
All right, she had gotten into a relationship. She had put on some weight and she wanted to get a little more fit. My trainer at the time, he trains women for fitness competitions. And she said, will you sign up for a fitness competition with him? Because she knows that I'm dedicated and I'll stick to the diet plan and the workout. And I said, hell fucking no, I don't want to do that. And she just every day was like, could you please do it? Could you please do it? And finally I was like, okay, fuck it. For you, I'll do it so you can get fit. And so her plan was to do all the fitness and all the diet, but not actually do the competition. But since I had told her I would do it, I had signed up for the competition for her. She dropped out halfway through. I'm dedicated. So I continued to go through with it. And I actually won second place as a vegan, but I'll be dead honest with you. I would never do that again. And I would not recommend anybody do it because I think that whole world, without putting anybody down, like if that's what you want to do and that's your choice, that's awesome. But I think it's kind of unhealthy. I mean, a lot of the people that do those fitness competitions are on different kinds of stimulants and drugs, and they're not good for your body. I mean, the spray tanning, all of it. But
still,
it was interesting to get that fit. And I'm not saying everybody who does those kinds of fitness competitions uses different kinds of stimulants, but a lot of people do. And I also saw a lot of people in that industry with eating disorders and body dysmorphia because you're constantly striving to look the way that you look when you go on stage.
Right.
So if you're going to do that, I would say be really careful. And when you come off of it, because it's such a calorie restricted, carb restricted kind of a diet that you need to be on to do it, the like 2 months afterwards, one has to be really careful to like reverse their dieting, reverse their training, so that way they don't just blow up and get fat, because that happens.
Right. Oh wow. Well,
and, yeah.
We're going to bring on our guest. We'll come back later after Veronica to more photos to shock Roxy, but I'm really excited to bring on Veronica Monet. Veronica is a longtime friend of mine, and she's actually going to be doing this show with me a week from tonight. So welcome, Veronica.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here. And I was really intrigued, actually, Roxy, by the, you said you won as a vegan. Is that true?
Mm-hmm.
That is really awesome.
No, second. I won second place as a vegan.
Second place is vegan. That's really awesome. Congratulations. And I know that whole world is full of chemicals and dieting down to a place that's not healthy, that you can't sustain all year. So I get what you're saying, but still, I just wanted to congratulate you. I think it's impressive.
Thank you.
So just like I'm going to be asking Roxy all sorts of questions, but this is a chance, Roxy, you're just meeting Veronica for the first time. What's your history? Like when I told you about Veronica, you got all excited. So what does Veronica Monet mean to you? What do you remember about her? How has she influenced you?
Okay, so I had a girlfriend named Kamala Devi, who you know, Veronica, and we were together for 8 years. We just broke up last year. We're still deep, deep beloved. But she did a one-woman play, and there was, I think, 5 sacred prostitutes or sacred sexual healers that she featured, and you were one of them. And the story that she told, like when she was playing you on stage, there was a monologue that she had that just touched me. And it was something about when, I can't remember how it went, so I'm going to butcher it if you don't mind.
Fine.
Okay. It was something about people saying like, doesn't your pussy get all stretched out? And you were saying, actually, the vagina is a muscle, and the more you use it, the stronger it gets. And the way that the actual line was, it was so like eloquently and poetically put. And I fell in love with you during that monologue. And we've never met, I've never seen you, but I know that you're a legend in the field of the world of sex positivity and communication and much, much more.
Well, thank you, Roxy. And I felt very honored when Kamali Devi wanted to do a one-woman show about my life. I was really excited about that. She was really gracious too. She let me go over every single line of dialogue to make sure it felt like a fit. So my one regret was that I didn't actually get to see it in person because she was doing it in Southern California and I was up in Northern California, but I caught like some stills from online and that was it. So if you have any video of that, I'd love to see it.
I will message her and find out where the video is.
Be awesome.
I didn't take any video because I was just totally engaged watching you through her.
Right. She's so funny. Put on a blonde wig.
Yeah, I think I was expecting you to be like blonde because of that.
I was super blonde just a couple months ago. I am an unpredictable girl who likes to change it up all the time.
Beautiful, beautiful. So, you know, one of the things, honestly, and I'm even older than Veronica, so I can say this. Veronica and Roxy, you both represent two different generations of very incredible women that are kind of one part outrageous, one part curious, one part very expressive, one part very wise. And those are all things that don't always go together. You know, oftentimes people associate that someone who's in the sex industry or very sex positive is, you know, there's a lot of kind of concept of it's a bimbo or it's somebody who's an nymphomaniac or it's somebody who's, you know, all these crazy things. And I know both of you really well, and you're both like two of the smartest women I know. And Roxy is married to, I always say, the most intelligent man that I know. Wow. So I just want to acknowledge that. And how have you seen the sex positive movement change? Like, what was it like when you first started? And what's it like to see where it is now, represented by someone like Roxy?
Yeah, well, you know, it's interesting actually that when we talk about sex positive, first of all, it's a big topic. You know, I don't know if you know my cousin Alina Gabash. She just released an anthology earlier this year called Sex Positive Now. I've got a chapter in there. I am definitely about sex positive, and yet there's a lot of different things that fly under that umbrella. So don't necessarily, not everybody who claims to be sex positive is always in agreement with each other on the same page. I think what I have seen over the years is the world has gotten to be more sex positive, more accepting. You know, my background was, I was in the sex industry for about 15 years and did a lot of talk shows where I was being vilified. And it's fascinating for me now to have arrived to this place where a presidential candidate like Kamala Harris or AOC in Congress, also the Socialist, Democratic Socialist Party, all embracing decriminalizing prostitution. It's just astounding that we finally got to this place. I mean, it's been a lot of blood, sweat, and tears to get there. But that's part of what I think about when I think about sex positive is, do we allow people adult people to have consensual sex the way they want to have it? So, you know, some of the other things that have happened is, I remember being on John Kasich's Heartland on Fox News. I think did that show in like 2003. And it looks like maybe my internet's been a little bit wonky here. I don't know. Can you still hear me?
Yeah, we still hear you. Your video is a little bit,
Video's gone in and out,
yeah, but
yeah.
we can hear you. There hasn't been an audio break.
Great. So at that time, we just had Lawrence versus Texas, which was legislation that was asserting that if two gay men wanted to have sex in the privacy of their bedroom, the law should not be able to barge into their bedroom and arrest them. And the progression since 2003 of watching that law get passed, and now I was really happy to, last year, Senator Scott Wayner from California introduced legislation that was signed into law by Governor Gavin Newsom, which makes it possible for sex workers to report assault and rape without going to jail themselves. And that was a big stride towards embracing adult consensual behavior. Both of those were really landmark, in my opinion. So I've seen us, actually, I'm an activist, Scott. I think you know that about me. So I've really been about trying to change laws, and watching those laws start to change has really been gratifying for me. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what I'm passionate about.
Yeah, well, thank you. And Roxy, what do you feel like? What went on for you during the last 5 minutes as you listened to Veronica share?
I would like to hear more. I'm not very politically inclined or involved at all. I mean, I stay on the surface of it. And so I'm always appreciative when somebody is diving a little deeper. I know we all have our places in life and those roles switch. And I guess I'm curious, have you always been politically involved? Because I know there's different ways to express activism. I'm, an animal rights activist, but I'm not out with signs, going into factory farms. I do it in a different way. And I'm an activist for sex positivity and rights, but I'm not in Washington, or I'm not doing what you're doing as far as, watching legislation and senators. And I'm just grateful for any information you share, and curious how you got into it.
Well, when we talk about sex positivity, it's really important that people have the freedom to express themselves. So if kink is considered assault, then people go to jail. If polyamory is, the way it is right now, polyamory, people get their children taken away from them. So the laws have real life consequences on people's sex positivity. You can teach all the classes that you want and encourage people to kind of, fly their freak flag and be who they want to be. But if they're going to go to jail or lose their children or lose their job, you really haven't served them very well. So that's why it's really important to always understand how the laws operate and how they affect people's lives. For instance, 20 years ago, a woman went to jail for selling dildos in Texas. Those kind of gains, when we can shift the law and decriminalize pleasure, is really on the forefront of making it possible to be a sex positive person, making it possible to live with and love the people that you love. So yeah, I think that's just kind of like a basic requirement. If we're going to have a sex positive culture, we have to make sure that we change people's perceptions. We have to change the laws as well, because there's still people in polyamorous relationships, if they have children, who are kind of closeted around it. And it depends, of course, on what state they live in. Some states are more oppressive than others. But those are the kind of real concerns that I take to heart. And yeah, I have been involved politically for 25 years. Like a real passion of mine.
One quick thing, and then I saw Roxy raise her hand. Yeah. FYI, according to CNN, Kamala Harris is the #1 likely choice to be vice president. She's at the top of, they have like interviewing all the people based on what Biden has said. Yeah. And she's actually at the top of the chart of who he'll probably choose, which is really cool, because she was who when there were 20 candidates, she was the candidate I was excited about. So, Roxy, you had, yeah.
So you said for 25 years you've been politically involved as an activist. How did you
She was 16 when she started.
Oh yeah,
right. Do the
right.
math.
I have no idea how old you are now, so I'm not doing any math. How did you get involved in that? Like what was your entry point? And like what would you tell somebody like me who's my head's not in that, like I'm in the awareness of it, but again, surface wise, but what's the easiest way to go get more involved? I mean, everyone, you can say, go do your research, but.
No, I got involved because my girlfriend went to jail. I was working for my girlfriend. We were lovers. I worked for her for about 9 months. She was teaching me how to be a high-end escort. And I had come out of corporate America, 7 years working different desk jobs and being an office manager and everything. And I had a college degree, but contrary to the mythology, being an escort is not a bimbo job. Not if you're going to do it right and make a lot of money. And so I learned from her, and then she got arrested and the cops were harassing me, trying to get me to turn on her so that she would go to prison for a felony, because the fact that I worked for her made her a felon. Just that. Just the fact that she was my employer was a felony. And so really coming face to face with law enforcement and having those repercussions impact me personally made me very passionate. And I got involved. I moved to San Francisco to get away from police harassment, and got involved with various different political groups in San Francisco. And we rebirthed Coyote, Call Off Your Old Tired Ethics, which Margot St. James had founded in like 1976. We rebirthed it in 1991. And we just put this little ad in the paper with our phone number on it, and the phone started ringing off the hook, and we got invited to do television shows. And because I had a background in television, I knew how to talk to the camera, and I spent the next 15 years as a sex worker rights activist on national TV and international TV. So that was largely what my activism was. I certainly, I've protested in the streets for other things like against fracking or against the Gulf War. But most of my activism as a sex worker rights activist was to go on television and speak out, which made me then a target for the police. And I did get arrested, and they evicted me, and they audited me, and did everything they possibly could to shut me up. But I kept going.
Wow.
I kept going, and finally got to see this legislation pass. And so that's kind of how it happens when they come knocking on your door and try to interfere with your freedom. Then you kind of have choices. You can go underground, or you can stop, or you can fight. And I'm a fighter.
Very inspiring. Very
Yeah,
inspiring.
it's extremely inspiring. Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, but to answer your question, Roxy, and if anybody else is curious about this, if you want to get involved in sex worker rights, then just look up your local chapter of SWOP. That's Sex Worker Outreach Project, SWOP, SWOP. There's one in like every city. And I was there at the inception of that. Robin Few founded it here in the United States, and it just spread all over the world. It's amazing.
Wow. Thank you. Now, before you go.
Sex Worker
SWOP.
Outreach
Project.
SWOP. Thank you.
SWOP.
Yeah, I know the acronym. It's in project.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
You know, when I'm listening to people talk, there'll be a word or a phrase that I'll go, oh, follow up on that. And there's a word, and of everything you said, I was intrigued by and inspired by, but there's a word that I want us to talk about.
Okay.
Pleasure. I want to talk about the word pleasure. And because I know both you and Roxy are very good at experiencing pleasure. And we're in this unprecedented time on the planet where a lot of people are scared and a lot of people are freaking out. And probably a lot of people might not even think it's okay to be exploring pleasure right now, because they're glued to the computer reading all the stories about coronavirus and, you know, all the different belief systems, and it's the aliens, it's a biological weapon. And you know what? We're going to put all that crap aside. We're not going to discuss belief systems here, but I sure would love to hear each of you talk a little bit about pleasure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I'll go first on that. So I think that pleasure is it's a doorway to the divine. That's what the ancients in India taught. And that's just been my experience. That when I tap into pleasure, this is where I actually get to elevate my consciousness. This is where I actually get to contact the divine. And if I work with those energies in a way that's really elevated, I can actually even transport myself to some place other than this body. So I always think that's really interesting to use the pleasure that these bodies are capable of to actually transport us out of our bodies into other realms. So I realize not everybody will necessarily believe in that, but that is my spiritual path. Sex is my spiritual path. And it's also a beautiful form of therapy. So I often teach my clients, because, you know, I've been retired from the sex industry now for 15 years, and I've been coaching people around sex, relationships, and anger. And one of the things that I teach my clients is to self-pleasure in a way that actually helps them contact their grief. So for the people who are feeling grief right now, and who are feeling fear, I would want to invite them to use the pleasure that their genitals can create for them, to actually go into a deep meditation where you can allow yourself the full expression of those emotions. I have used orgasm to grieve the death of loved ones. It is incredibly powerful, and it can take your grief to a place where there's tremendous healing, and then you don't have to cry anymore. It's like you're reborn, you're rebirthed, you're rejuvenated. So, and I think that's the best use of grief, actually, is when it can go deep enough and be full enough that you're done with it and you can move on to do something creative. So, and that would be another thing I would bring in, is a little bit about, this is kind of a sex magic concept, but to hold in your mind the things that you want to affirm in your life, whether that's about love, relationships, prosperity, health, a world for all of us. What is this world going to look like when we get on the other side of this? To imagine that, to envision that at the moment of orgasm is really powerful. It plants it in you in a way that nothing else can.
Beautiful, 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 beautiful. Thank you. And, you know, it's interesting because I've, as you know, Veronica, I've been teaching and involved with sacred sexuality and Tantra for 30 years. And I believe, I was trying to figure out the first time we met, and I think we met at a time, didn't we meet at a Margot Anand workshop at Harbin?
I think we met at Harbin Hot Springs, and we were both teaching there. It might even have been Janet Lesson.
Yeah, Janet.
Polyamory.
That might have been it. That might have been it. Yep, yep, yep. I remember it was at Harbin. I remember being at Harbin with you. So thank you for that. And I just want to say it's true. Sex magic is extraordinary. And I'll tell a quick story about sex magic. I want to hear about pleasure from Roxy. So, and this is kind of a sweet story about sex magic. So about 10 years ago, I had a dog named Krishna. He was a Bichon. And he was about 10 years old. And he always wanted to be just Scott's dog. A couple of times when I kind of checked out getting another puppy, he let me know, no, I just want to be solo dog. But I came home one night with my wife, Suchi, and Veronica met Suchi, you knew Suchi. And he had pulled off, my dog had pulled off a stuffed dog that he was like playing with. And for the next few days, he like was always with this stuffed dog. So I kind of tuned in. I said like, hey, are you ready for a buddy? I was like, yep, I'm ready for a pal. So Suchi and I did sex magic to attract the perfect dog, to join our family.
Oh,
And 6 weeks later, I was walking Krishna, and we were walking, I was actually going to the post office where I live, and I had Krishna on the leash, and this little puppy comes bouncing out of the bushes, and literally been in the bushes, comes out. He and Krishna immediately connected, and I didn't even think about it. I was on the cell phone, probably talking to a client. I didn't really pay attention. And I went in, I got my mail, came back out. The dog follows us. And I'm aware there's a dog following us. I still haven't made the connection, right? And I opened the door to my van. And before my dog, Krishna, could jump in, this little stray jumps in first.
God.
Looks at me, total telepathic connection. And he's like, I've been looking for you. I ran away from the people that got me, and I'm looking for you. I'm your dog. It was so clear. And that's the dog that's barking right now, by the way.
I get it. What is
Full circle, total full circle. Uh-oh, Veronica froze. Oh no, come back, Veronica, come back. Well,
yes, I lost you.
yeah, you froze, Veronica. You know what? Try turning your camera off. Try turning your camera off and turning your camera back on. And meanwhile, I'm going to put the spotlight on dear Roxy to share for a minute about either your response to the sex magic, or how you use sex magic, or pleasure.
I noticed myself totally crushing on Veronica right now. It's so fun to watch myself get all Twitter-pated. I'm like, ooh. When you first asked me to talk about pleasure, I immediately thought about Viktor Frankl, who wrote Man's Search for Meaning. And I don't know what you know about him, but he was in the concentration camp.
And he was all about laughter, bringing laughter into the concentration camp.
Right. And that was his whole thing. Like, you can take every single thing away from me, but you cannot take away my inner desire for joy and expression of it and laughter. And so whenever I think about pleasure, my brain just goes to him on a cognitive level. When I loved everything Veronica said, it was really sweet in the way that she articulated it. It was titillating. I loved it. I was thinking of the sex magic ritual because I think that a lot of people think sex magic has to look a certain way. There needs to be like candles and witchery and herbs and like invocations, and it has to be a formula, and it doesn't. So I want to tell a story about a kinky, some people might think this is like a grotesque, rudimentary kind of sex magic ritual, but it works. So I had a long-term partner whose name I will leave out, and I will leave out whether it's a man or a woman, and because they're anonymous, and they were looking to deeply increase their income, like a lot. And so we did a sex magic ritual for it. And I went into my fantasy banks, and like we had a momentary invocation. We talked about what we were going to do. We intended our lovemaking, our orgasm to be for the raising of the vibration of this person's energy to attract more money in for a higher cause. It wasn't just to get more money for no reason. This person was a major activist. And so I went in, and in my orgasm, because sometimes I orgasm with just stimulation, and sometimes I'm having a fantasy, right? Whether I'm with someone or not with someone, it doesn't matter. And I always talk about it with the person. And so the fantasy that I had was I went up to God's office and I was like, God, I need you to fulfill this fantasy. And God got all kinds of kinky with me. And in this fantasy, God was a man. And God isn't always a man for me. And God said, well, you have to blow my accountant in order for this sex in order for me to give you what you want, you need to service my accountant, because that was my kink at the time. And I serviced God's accountant. Whoopsie, God's listening. And then it worked. it worked. This person got exactly what they wanted, and like to a fucking T. Was it the sex magic ritual? Was it their talent and their enthusiasm? I have no idea, but all I know is I had a fun time servicing God's accountant. And it was a beautiful sex magic ritual. And I basically want people to know that you can do sex magic ritual however the fuck you want to do it. Don't let anyone tell you have to do it a certain way. Because I always thought that. I was like, oh, I'm doing it wrong. I have to do, and I'm like, you know what? I have my own way I do my magic rituals. But yeah, pleasure. I laugh a lot. That's my pleasure. I self-pleasured before this session. I was so horny. Oh my God. Anyway, it was fun.
Thank you. I love Roxy's laugh. I've told her I want to make love to her laugh, right? I mean, doesn't she just have the best laugh? I actually now have the Roxy cackle meter. And when she gives us a really good cackle, it's like, oh, that's an 8.7 on the Roxy cackle meter. Imagination. One of the things that's beautiful, because it's not common to hear a story about having a sex magic experience where you blew God's accountant. I've been around a long time. I've done a lot of interviews, and that is a first. And what I'm appreciating is imagination. And so I'd love to ask both of you about how we use imagination for pleasure, and again, for weaving our sexuality with our spirituality. Of course, most people by now know that Tantra means to weave. And so in Tantra and sacred sexuality, we're weaving the masculine and the feminine. We're weaving the sacred with the sensual. We're weaving our spiritual being with our animal body. And opening up our imagination is so beautiful and vital. And I'll share one quick thing, and then I want to hear about it from both of you. As you both know, my wife passed away 8.5 years ago. And I've had all sorts of amazing experiences of her, what I believe, coming, talking to me, etc. But the interesting part is it's all in my imagination, right? It's all in the imagination. I'm imagining what she's saying to me. I'm having a lucid dream, which is in my deep imagination. And so I want to acknowledge that there are times as, oh, I'm just imagining it. But what if I'm just imagining it? But what if everything is somebody, somewhere, some part of us just imagining it? What if our higher self is imagining this current dream world, right? So I just want to kind of toss to both of you, imagination and pleasure.
Scott, what I have, the feeling I have, like I did a past life regression years and years ago. And I still don't know, did I remember actual past lives that I lived? Because I did remember something. Or maybe, this was one of those past life regressions where the psychic tells you about your past life. I told her about my past lives. And my feeling is, even to this day, who cares if it was real or not? It serves me. There is some way in which those 3 past lives shape my life now. And whether that's metaphor or it's the literal truth, kind of immaterial. It helps me understand part of what I'm doing in this lifetime. And what I need to work on, what I came here to work on. So wherever that information came from, that's great. In therapy today, I did a 2-hour session with my therapist, and I visualized a particular spiritual guide that, again, how do I know that that is an actual entity? Well, there was a moment during the therapy where I actually thought that that entity was talking to me, and it was novel information. It was something that I would not have of my own accord brought up or heard myself say. Yet, how do we know there aren't all these different layers to us, right? So maybe that's a part of me. You know, I've been doing some of this IFS, internal family systems therapy, and they talk about all of our different parts. So I suppose that this grandmother could be a part of me, but she's been with me for about 30 years. And I get a lot of strength and wisdom from her. So whether it's a part of me or it's an actual entity that's separate from me, I don't know that that really matters. I kind of go always by, you'll know by the fruits. Is it bearing fruit that is beautiful, constructive, positive, or is it taking you somewhere else that's negative and dark? So I don't know. That's the first thing that came off the top of my head with that.
I love that. And I agree. When I work with people and they tell me about past life stuff, what's it telling you on an archetypal level, right? You know, what is that in your archetypal landscape showing to you? And right now, I mentioned it before, there's all these incredible belief systems floating around because we're all trying to make sense of this incredible thing going on the planet. And I did a coaching session with a client today who's really freaked out trying to figure out, you know, is it a biological weapon and how's long it last, all that stuff. And he's really down the rabbit hole. And he and his girlfriend are fighting because she doesn't even want him to come over. And she's like into super safety. And I have several couples that are struggling over different ideas of how to manage this thing.
Wow.
And the place that I encourage people to go is notice what it is you want to believe. Notice what it is you're collecting evidence to believe. And like you just said, Veronica, is that serving you? Right? Does that belief serve you? Right? Does it, and when people, well, how do I know if it's serving me? It's the same thing when somebody says, hey, am I in a dysfunctional relationship or not? Well, how is this relationship or how are these beliefs impacting the other parts of your life? Are you getting along better with your children and your family? Are you more productive? Are you sleeping better at night? Are you taking better care of yourself? You know, these are the questions we have to ask as we look at what we're feeding our mind with in terms of the belief systems. And kind of bring it back, what's beautiful about both of you, because I know you both really well, is you feed your spirit with a lot of pleasure and a lot of fun imagination, right? You know, you don't feed yourselves with what I would say negativity, right? And so, and that doesn't mean that, and you're both very highly productive in the world, by the way, very productive women. So we can be productive in the world and we can still have fun. And a lot of it is not only looking at what we put in our body food-wise, and I believe you're both vegan, incidentally. Yeah. I remember when I had lunch with you recently, a couple months ago, very specific. We went to a very specific cafe where they knew exactly how to bring you what you liked. And Roxy's also, she's always posting these amazing vegan dishes she's making. So, but just like the food we put in our body, what we're thinking, what our belief systems, what we're imagining is so important. Roxy.
Okay, so the two words were imagination and pleasure.
Yes.
All right, so I'm influenced by what both of you have said. And I was thinking, when I talk to someone, and I can use right now as an example. So I'm talking with Veronica for the first time ever. And of course, I have a connection with Scott. I'm imagining, my brain is like, I feel so comfortable with Veronica. Wow, I really like her. God, I feel like I've known her for so long. And then I'm imagining that you feel the same way. And so I feel even more comfortable. And whether you feel that way or not, it doesn't matter. It creates more connection and more pleasure in my brain to even just like have that thought. And so when I'm like, oh, imagination leads to this, potential false reality that you actually are having the same thought that I'm having. But in my mind, that leads to more connection, which leads to more pleasure. And then let's say you're like, oh no, I'm not having that thought at all. it doesn't matter because my pleasure receptors are already kicked on in this way of connection. So even if you tell me, I never want to talk to you again, you strange woman, my brain is still like, wow, we had such a lovely time. And it doesn't change my reality. Like, I still am deeply aware of the reality of what's happening. But yeah, I think imagination being used for pleasure to create connection. It's not like the fake it till you make it kind of thing, but and it's not delusional in the sense, but it is, Scott, what you were saying, being more on the positive side of the bell curve as opposed to on the negative, where we put our thoughts. So I could be sitting here having a thought like, oh, she doesn't like me, she thinks I'm stupid, you know, why is she on, why she might be wondering, why am I on here? And those create disconnect. But if I let myself go into the other place, it creates connection, even if it's not real. Does that make sense? Does that sound crazy?
It makes perfect sense.
Okay, good.
Perfect sense. And
I have to weigh in here now, because that's just
weigh in.
And that is that how I'm experiencing you is you are delightful, and I find myself feeling curious to learn more about you.
Oh, I'm blushing.
You are, how sweet.
Yeah.
She got so excited, Veronica. What happened was, we're doing this, she and I are doing this show for at least 6 weeks. And she said, the one thing, Scott, is I can't do April 17th. You got to find somebody else. And I thought, God, who do I know that could be as interesting as Roxy? And I thought of you. And so I reached out to you, and thank God right away we connected, and you said yes. When I said to her, oh, I found somebody to, I hope you don't mind the words, replace you on April 17th. It's, do you know Veronica Monet? You started gushing. She was like gushing. Veronica Monet, she's a fucking legend. Veronica Monet.
It's true. I did start gushing.
So,
yes, your name precedes you.
Roxy, thank you.
There's a couple things, because there are people watching, that I really want to riff on that Roxy said it's important. If we're going to imagine how another person is experiencing us, please imagine it in the most positive way possible. Because of course we are energy beings and we pick it up. So if you're like, oh, she doesn't like me, all of a sudden that person might start going, oh, I don't really like you. It's like, we're very psychic, we connect. And since my dogs are right here playing, I got to give this example. So my older dog, Krishna, spent 10 years with Boobily. Boobily was the little puppy we found 10 years ago. So in April, Krishna passed away. And Boobily got pretty sad, and he was he gained some weight. And so I knew right away I was going to get another dog, and I got another Bichon, right? Well, when I brought home little Jasmine Bear, Boobily was not impressed. He was not into it. He immediately got up on my lap. He jumped on my lap, and he was snarling at her and not letting her get anywhere near me. Okay.
Oh,
right. But you know what? In her little puppy thing, she's just, oh, that's how we play. That's how we play. Exactly. Yeah. They're both down right here. And she didn't take it personally. She didn't go off and go, oh, I'm not welcome in this house. She just kept wagging her tail and coming at him to play. And the more he'll snarl and snap, the more she thought that's how he was playing. Well, now they play together hours every day. He's lost weight. They cuddle together. They're like, and it's the moral of the story. It's like, she didn't buy into his crankiness. She just stayed in her own imagination of, this is how we play in this household. And right?
That's beautiful. And I love how your dog is barking when for effect, when he wants to underline what you're saying.
Here he is. This is Boobily. This is Boobily.
Yes. Oh.
Yeah. You're the star of the show today, Boobles. Okay.
So sweet.
Scott, one of the things listening to you talk about how your dogs kept this positive image, it made me think about there's not just, and also listening to Roxy talk about holding this, how does this person feel about me? I'm going to imagine that they feel positive about me. When I was escorting, which I did for 15 years, one of the things that I was really good at was seeing, even if there was only one thing to admire or like about a human being, that to really amplify that to them. Because people came to me a lot of times shame-based and frightened and shut down. And I really thought that my job was to help them see their own beauty. And that doesn't mean that they weren't doing sometimes and behaving in certain ways that I may have not particularly found attractive. But I focused on the positive, and I watched people blossom. I watched people aspire to my imagining of them. And I think this is a gift that we can give each other, that we can always be looking at our highest, each other's highest selves, and really evoking that and bringing that to the surface so that we can all fall in love with ourselves even.
Thank you. Thank you. You know, we're here to learn to love, starting with ourselves. And self-love is not selfish. The more we can love ourselves and fill our gourd, the more we have to give to others. And it is human nature that we want to contribute to the well-being of others. The happiest people I know, Roxy would definitely be right up there, are people who are constantly of service. I mean, Roxy's someone who feeds the homeless and is always in service. And she's one of the happiest people I know. And conversely, the most unhappy people I've met in my life are the people who are not of service. They are just like, give me, give me, give me, give me, give me. And there's like this bottomless pit that no matter what they get, it's never enough. And those are the most really tragic. They're the most tragic people I've met in my life. And some of them are very wealthy, you know, and some of them are famous, right? But it's like filling ourselves and then giving to others. And I love what you said, that when we see someone, and especially, let's face it, our sexuality is where the shame usually lies. And I believe that shame is the great human epidemic. And so when someone comes to you as a sex worker back in those days, or when we're working with any of our sexuality, whether it's in a professional or personal capacity, the slightest little thing can trigger the shame wound.
Oh, yes.
Right? And so learning that no matter what somebody's into, to never judge it, and to realize that when we're in a sexual space with someone, to always honor them and just shower them with love, you know?
Yeah, and there's artful ways to let somebody know that you may not be into what they're into, but without breaking the heart connection and without expressing any kind of shaming. I think sometimes what people do is they feel frightened that they're going to get drug into something they don't want to do. But if you have really great boundaries, you don't have to have that fear. And then you can really just celebrate people's diversity. It may not be your thing, so have a boundary, but celebrate that it's their thing.
You know, I want to say to our Facebook friends, I've pulled up, I've got two devices, my iPad and my phone. So I'm looking at the watch party and I'm looking at the Love Coach Academy feed.
Yeah.
If anybody has any thoughts or questions, please post them and I'll read the thoughts, I'll read the questions. And if anybody's interested in coming in and asking a question or two, you can come into our Zoom room and I will get you the number in a moment.
Yeah.
I'm going to share a story that I don't think I've ever shared publicly, and then I'd love to hear from Roxy because we haven't heard from her for a bit. I think a big turning point for me in what we're talking about, probably this story took place about 1993. So when was that? 27 years ago. And I was producing television in LA. It was just then going out of educational television and into more metaphysical television. And I met a celebrity couple that I did some work with, and we became friends. And I've always been kind of Scott, compassionate, flower child kind of guy. And they were very careful and cautious about who they let in to their circle. But over the years, I did a lot of work with them, and trust was built. And finally, they invited me to come visit them where they lived. And I spent a couple of nights there because they lived kind of far away. And one night we had a couple of drinks. We were a little bit relaxed. And the wife asked me if she could show me her precious sacred art. And I said, of course, I'd love to see it. And she was really nervous, but she was really, really nervous. But I could tell there's like a lot of courage for her to show me this. So she takes me down the hallway and she opens up her room. And in this room was all sorts of paintings and sculptures. And they were all paintings and sculptures of a woman being taken by a dog sexually. And in many of the images or pictures, clearly she had them, the artist drew them because it was her in the picture. And she was so innocent. And I gotten to know her so well. She had such an innocence about her that I just wept at the beauty of her courage to show it to me. And what normally is such a, and some of these were very graphic, and some of the images were intense, right? And something that we could easily go into judgment or repulsion around. But because of who she was and the way she was looking at me for my response, I just wept with the beauty of her innocence. And whatever it was inside of her that was her healing or that was her trip. And I think that was for me like a key turning point in my own journey of what you're talking about, Veronica, of learning to see the beauty, even when it's something that personally isn't our thing, or that we could even find, quote, repulsive, but to find the beauty in it through the other person's eyes.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. Oh, and really, you know, I'm going to come full circle to what we were talking about, the divine, to find the divine in every human being that you meet.
Yes. Yeah.
Scott, I have a previous engagement that I need.
We got to let you go. And we pulled you in. We got you for an hour. She said 30 minutes, Roxy. We kept her for an hour. And
well,
I noticed.
I couldn't leave you guys. You're just too enchanting.
I look forward to, we have a chat on Sunday, and then I look forward to our Zoom that we'll do next week, a week from tonight. Right. What's for dinner tonight?
Oh, salad. Salad and steamed kale.
Oh, very healthy.
It was a pleasure, privilege, and honor to meet you on here.
I'm so glad that we got to meet too, and I'm looking forward to, I'll hit you up with a friend request on Facebook. I hope we get a chance to get to know each other better.
That sounds wonderful. Thank you.
All right, guys.
Thank you, Veronica.
Good weekend. Love.
All right. Well.
Oh my God, she's fucking hot. Scott. Oh, you did not tell me. Oh my, wow, that woman. You know what I'm going to be doing tonight? Looking at Veronica Monet.
And you know what I love about that? And of course I appreciate it as an older guy, that you can find her so hot. And she is. She's an incredibly hot, beautiful woman.
It's not hard to find her hot. She's fucking existing as hot.
And so what is hot, right? You know, because let's talk about that, because that's one of the things that, again, I appreciate about you. So let's talk about what's funky, and then let's talk about what's wonderful about Roxy. What's funky is that most boys, including myself, their first sexual experience, which lasts anywhere from 5 to 10 years, is masturbating to airbrushed pictures of anorexic girls, right? And it creates such a false sense of sexuality, such a false sense of lovemaking. And if they're watching porn, no matter what the guy does to the girl's just, yes, yes, more, more. And it's really fucked up. And it's messed up for guys and it's messed up for gals. And I've done a lot of work as a coach, helping women who are aging and, you know, gravity is having its thing, or they've had babies or whatever it is, and they don't look like that airbrushed teenage girl. And a lot of women, including my wife, have real issues around that. I mean, one of the reasons I think she left her body was she didn't like to age. And so there's so much cultural stuff around aging and the idea that sexy is only young, or thin, or whatever we're being sold. And because I know Roxy, you know, she's shared with me who some of her lovers are, have been or are. And I'm not going to mention any names.
Thank you.
I'm not going to mention any names. Don't worry. I know. And now I'm going to show pictures of Roxy's lovers over the years. No, I'm not going to do that. Here's the Rogues Gallery.
And that is for their privacy. Not everybody is as public as I am. So.
Absolutely. But the point is that Roxy has a real diversity in who she finds attractive. Men, women, different ages, different shapes, sizes, colors. And that's beautiful because clearly on some level, it's who they are as beings and not just a particular type. So with that,
I think that I'm typically attracted to happy, joyful people. Mm-hmm. And I know in my past, when I have not worked on and integrated those parts of me that were a little bit fractioned, I was more attracted to the depressed, downer, kind of bitchy girl, or the guy who was like this stereotypical kind of douchey dude, you know, I hate to use that word, but whatever. And yeah, but I'm really attracted to happy people. And so Veronica was just radiating joy. I mean, it was just oozing out of her. And in that is oozing pleasure and with her sexuality. And it's also, she's also oozing boundaries. Like when she was talking about boundaries, I was excited because I thought, oh, thank God, here's a person who can you can only maximize your joy and your pleasure if you have good boundaries. Otherwise, you go into your maximizing your joy and your pleasure and you cross your boundaries all the time. So that all was really sexy. So you know, one of my lovers, yes, is we have an age gap and it's a significant one. But they say no to me a lot and they make requests and like boundary requests. And it's so sexy and attractive because I can trust them more to know where they stand. And they are so happy and so joyful, and it's beautiful. I love it. I have been attracted to, you know, it's interesting. I'm allergic to people who are stereotypically good looking. And I'm allergic to that man or woman who walks into the room and is charismatic and flawless in their face and they present perfect. Like something repulses me about that. So I have to be careful to not automatically dismiss someone who looks really good. Because they might be a really attractive, wonderful friend or lover. You know, I don't just casually take on lovers, so I don't even like to say lover. But yeah, I have to be careful to not discriminate against really good-looking people.
That's not common. That is definitely not common. But I love you for that. I do. So we've got some comments, and a lot of friends are watching. Paul McFarland and Trish. And if anybody wants to come into the webinar room, go to Zoom, and where it says join, you're going to join 641-439-912. Our webinar room is 641-439-912. And if you come into the webinar room, then let us know if you have a question or a thought, what it is. And if I think that it would be interesting to our viewers and to Roxy, then we'll bring you in to ask. Or you can just put something in the chat box and I'll be happy to read it. Yes, Roxy.
You know what I was thinking about when I was more actively teaching kink classes and workshops and online stuff. It was a lot about communication and boundaries and communication and boundaries and over and over communication and boundaries. And they're like, when are we going to get to learn how to dom someone or sub them or rope tying or whatever the fuck kind of kink they were into, which is great. I was like, you know what? No, we're going to talk for a long time, and we got to get real good with boundaries. Because I love that Veronica like brought it back to that you can't get into pleasure without deep boundaries, and like how she could see the beauty in all of these clients that she had, even if she didn't agree with them, because her boundaries were so exceptional. Yeah. And I was just appreciating that, because I see so many people that just want to like do the thing without laying the deep groundwork. And boundaries are not something you just learn about one day and you have them. Like, they take practice, because you know, it's like going to a martial arts class and you might learn how to throw that punch over and over again, but then when you're in the back alley and someone attacks you, you know, the nervous system that's up, and you have to have practice being in combat. And it's like practice being in boundaries as well, and doing it in a sweet way, because a lot of people, they don't have any boundaries, and then when they learn their boundaries, they express them with such aggression that it's almost, it's rude and disrespectful. The way it's like, good job for saying your boundaries, and could you be less of an asshole about it, you know? and I get it. Like, if you haven't had good boundaries your whole life and you're just learning them, sometimes you got to just get it out and learn to refine your boundaries. And that's a really beautiful practice as well.
Absolutely.
To be able to say no, so that the other person still feels respected and loved and honored, and the boundary is clear.
So I'm going to riff on that for a moment, because it's one of my favorite topics. You've heard me say this at classes and workshops. The key is setting boundaries with compassion. Setting boundaries with compassion. And here's a real quick little tip when you're setting a boundary. Always lead with authentic reassurance that you care about the other person. Because what stops us from setting a boundary is we're afraid they're going to think we don't care about them. And conversely, if somebody hears a boundary, often we hear the boundary as fuck you, I don't care about you, right? So when setting a boundary, always lead with authentic reassurance that you care about them, and if it's appropriate, that you love them. Set the boundary, stay with the boundary, stick with the boundary. But then at the end is like a sandwich. Like, one piece of bread is authentic reassurance that you care. Then like the middle part is the boundary itself. And then on the other end, the other slice of bread, if you will, is being present to whatever their thoughts and feelings are. And if they're disappointed, that's okay. It's okay that they're disappointed. It's okay that they're sad. It's okay that they're angry. Doesn't mean you change your boundary because they're sad or frustrated or angry, but we give them the gift of acknowledging that there was a reason that they wanted whatever it was they wanted, right? And we can ideally even see the beauty of what they were longing for. We don't have to agree to doing it, but we can see the courage in asking or the desire. So give them the gift of acknowledging the beauty of their ask and acknowledging their disappointment or their uncomfortable feelings when they hear no. And that's the way to set boundaries with compassion. That's the 3-minute version. There's a 2-hour version that I've done in my classes. One other thing I want to riff on and then I'm going to take a look and see what we've got going on in questions. We've got a lot of people watching. Back when I was producing educational television, one of the shows that I won an Emmy Award for was a show called The Mating Game. It was adolescent pregnancy prevention, it was teenagers. And it was a game show format, and it was great. It was a really good show. It was clever, creative. And when we would write our shows, and this show was seen by millions and millions of kids, we always wanted to know, what's the thesis statement? What do we want for the audience to know or to feel as a result of seeing the show? And the primary thesis statement for the show, which won an Emmy Award, was, if you're not old enough to talk about it, you're not old enough to do it. What's interesting is I did that show 1982, 83, 84, back in those years. That was a long time ago. But now as a coach, I'm still working with adults that still do it before they talk about it. And that's what Roxy was saying. That's this is a riff on Roxy's wisdom. Hey, talk about it. What does kissing, if we're dating, what does kissing mean to you? What's your interpretation of if we're going to kiss? What's your interpretation of if we're going to spend the night? What's that mean to you? What's it mean to me? How's your relationship with your mom? How's your relationship with your dad? Tell me about your exes, right? Like, these are the conversations to have before we get drunk and fuck, all right? So that's my big riff, and I'm going to turn it over to Roxy to share whatever she wants to share while I take a look at some of these questions coming in.
I like that you left it off of drunk and fuck. Joanne, your turn.
Well, isn't that what happens, right? I mean, sadly.
I know, it does. It does.
The vast majority of teenagers, we'll talk about teenagers and adults, the vast majority of teenagers, their first sexual experience, they were under the influence. Almost all adolescent pregnancies, they were under the influence. When I'm coaching people and they're telling me about a really crappy experience they had, almost always they were under the influence. So leave it at that.
I just heard a story today from a friend where it was two friends and they were under the influence and there wasn't boundaries set and it got confusion and one of them was upset after. And I'm just like, God damn, why aren't we talking about boundaries before we get under the influence? And why are we getting under the influence if we don't have good boundaries? Because if you don't have good boundaries and you're under the influence, the boundaries usually go out the window.
Exactly.
So that's the whole conversation in itself.
Well, and that's one thing I want to acknowledge about Roxy is that Roxy is not someone who uses, I don't think you use really any significant substances. You're like the happiest person I know and one of the best sexed persons, the people that I know.
Okay, so I'll have a drink every now and then. I mostly don't like alcohol because it hurts my tummy, but like a really nice anejo or a mezcal, tequila every once in a while. And, some psychedelics every once in a while. I'm not anti-drugs. It's just when I don't use drugs or any kind of intoxicant. I'm saying, when I say drugs, I say drugs and alcohol. I don't use anything like that to get myself a little looser so I can talk to somebody. And I don't want to be with somebody who needs intoxicant in order to like get a little looser and more comfortable with me. Like, I want to get comfortable with you in our sober states because that feels the most safe and it feels the most authentic. And then after we've gotten really comfortable for lots of times together, then maybe we might be a little bit intoxicated together, but like certainly not wasted. I mean, I'm not judging you if you do that, but God damn, dude, that is so high school. But anyway, you might want to be living in that time, and that's cool. Good for you. It's not my world. And I honestly, psychedelics, I wouldn't just do psychedelics with anybody. I want to know there are some people who are really close to me. I actually have a lover that I don't do psychedelics with. And if they want to do psychedelics, they do the psychedelics and I'll hang out with them sober because like when I do, let's say if I want to do mushrooms, for example, I am not touchy-feely. I am not sensual. And one of my lovers is super touchy-feely and sensual on mushrooms. And so if we do them together, it's a bad fit. They feel all rejected, and I feel annoyed. And so I'm happy.
Awful.
Yeah, it's terrible. So we've, I don't just casually do psychedelics with people. It's not like, oh, let's say get in a group together and do that, like Burning Man style. No, this is not my jam. I'm mostly like sober. Yeah. You said something. Oh, I was thinking about this lover that I have, and when we first got together, we took it so slow in the bedroom. Like they came over, and there was, obvious chemistry. It wasn't the kind of chemistry where your bodies are like fucking magnets, but that's even more important to set boundaries when it's like that. And so I said, hey, when you come over, let's have a platonic, non-sexual cuddle where we can just lean our bodies next to each other and we'll cuddle. Maybe we can massage each other a little bit, but no sexual energy. If it's there, turn it off, set it aside. Because if somebody can't do that and they're just too ramped up, I'm like, okay, your boundaries are shit. I'm not interested. So we did that. And then the next time they came over, we upgraded it. Let's cuddle, but let's actually talk about the fact that we have sexual chemistry together. Let's not run it. We're not going to be grinding on each other. And let's just talk about it. And then the next time it was that with, let's explore kissing on the mouth with no tongue, allowing the energy to feel sexual when we kiss, no grinding. Like we were very explicit. And I started like hesitating the next time we had a date. I thought, okay, now we're going to add in some tongue, right? So we were very explicit. What kind of kissing? And I was concerned that, oh, am I being a little bit too rigid about this? Should I just be more in the moment, enter in the flow? And at the end of that fourth date, they said to me, I am so relieved right now that you gave me like explicitly what we were doing, because I don't have to wonder what we were doing and I could just relax into it. And so it was just reassurance for me, because I doubt myself a lot that I'm being too rigid or have too many boundaries, because a lot of people are like, oh, just relax a little bit. And I'm like, no, I'm really relaxed and I like to have my boundaries. I know I can relax into those boundaries. It feels better.
That's so important. And here's a message for you guys. Look, if a woman's going to receive us, and for me, the most wonderful feeling in the world is when a woman really wants me to be inside of her. Okay, that's an incredible, it's the greatest gift. And the most amazing temple I've ever entered is the temple of a woman. And for a woman to really want us, she's got to feel safe. And there is that both sides. I mean, of course, there is a certain sexual attraction about mystery and all of that. I get it. But ultimately, having worked with a lot of couples and a lot of women, a woman needs to feel safe. And notice how many times Roxy was talking about if he's too jacked up, if he doesn't have good boundaries, right? A woman wants to be held. She wants to be able to really relax and feel safe so that she can fully receive her lover, masculine or feminine, man or woman. She can really receive. And at the highest level, I believe that the divine feminine, and obviously we all have a masculine side, we all have a feminine side. So I don't want to get lost. I don't want to anybody that's transgender, I'm not wanting to offend anybody. So I'm just.
You can use gender normative talk and we'll assume that you're talking about a cis woman and a cis man.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you. So the point is that we want to have that combination of arousal and safety. And what's interesting is the woman needs to feel safe in her heart and in her yoni. She needs to know she's safe. And you know what? I want to acknowledge that men need to know they're going to be safe too, right? It's a big deal to make love. I want to just say it. It's a big deal. And look, I was born and raised in Southern California. I've been around it all. I've seen it all. I've experienced enough. And when two people merge It's a thing, and it is sacred, and it should be held as sacred. Now, I'm not promoting monogamy or polyamory or knocking any of that, but I do want to promote the sanctity of two people choosing to merge and what comes up. Because when two people merge, especially if it's really, really, really good, have you ever noticed that somebody is going to hit an intimacy threshold? And it felt so good. And then the ego comes up and goes, whoa, remember after that last relationship, we decided we're never going to go there again? Remember that? We made a holy vow, I will never trust another man. We made that holy vow, I will never open myself up again like that. So while you were like, all intoxicated with that experience, did you notice that she's got a pimple on her cheek? Or did you notice that, he kind of walks funny? And literally our ego will start coming up with what's wrong with the other person. Or have you really checked out her relationship to her ex? Or have you really figured out like what the financial situation is here? Whatever, our ego will come up with what's wrong with the other person because we've crossed our intimacy threshold. And that's why we need to know what our boundaries are. And that's why we need to be able to have a good communication. And that's why it's like, okay, as we merge, what does this mean to you? What's likely going to come up for you? If we're opening up Pandora's box, what might come flying out? And this is all, we got to talk about this stuff. So I kind of went off on a little bit of a thing, but I'm going to bring the thing back to Roxy for a minute. And we'll wrap up in a few minutes because I recognize we're getting close. Roxy, any thoughts about my little wrap there?
No, I agree. I agree. And I think I kept thinking in my head, I distinguished cis women and cis men, which for those of you who don't know, a cisgendered woman is a person who identifies as a woman who was born with female genitalia and female parts. And same thing with a man. It's a man who identifies as a man and was born a male, like their sex is male, as opposed to a trans man who is born a woman and then identifies as a man and is typically has transitioned into man. They're not as good with the surgery, but the reason why I was thinking about this is because when on a bell curve, like there's really common things that estrogen do to women and that testosterone do to men. And the reason I said, Scott, you can speak gender normatively in that we'll assume you're talking about cis women and cis men is because I have a lot of friends in the trans community that are trans women, meaning they were born as men in a male body and then they've transitioned into a woman body. And I have trans male friends who were born in a woman's body and are identify as male and have transitioned. And my observation, and this is just my observation, is that a cisgendered woman who was born a woman, identifies as a woman, lives as a woman, has more fear being in groups of men and feels less safe and wonders like, fuck, are they going to hurt me? Are they going to rape me? Am I walking down an alley? And this is, again, the on a bell curve, the most normal woman. I'm not talking about the woman who's a fucking fighting kickboxer and is like double agent and could kick ass of all the men in the room. A cis woman has more fear in those realms. A cis man typically walks into a room and they're typically not scared. They're not looking around at a group of other men or the women wondering, oh, fuck, are they going to hurt me? They just inherently feel more safe because men tend to be bigger and more dominant creatures, right? On the bell curve. So what I've noticed with my trans friends is, I'll speak about like the trans women friends that I have, I notice that they don't have the same kind of fear that cis women have being alone in a room, because a lot of trans women friends of mine transitioned when they were older. They didn't transition when they were 13, right? So they lived the majority of their life as a male feeling safe. And now that they are in their, right female body, they still carry that safety that they had as a man with them. And so I wanted to say that because when I said to you, Scott, you can speak gender normatively talking to cis men and cis women, that was the reason why I said that, because you were speaking about safety. And I hope that makes sense what I'm saying. Whereas I also have trans men friends that they live the majority of their life as a woman, and they don't have the same kind of safety that I see in cis men. Even though they are in their right body, in their male body now, there's so much fear that they lived in as a woman, it doesn't automatically just transfer over. So I think it's okay in our conversations, and we can even state it at the beginning, like, hey, we're going to use the gender pronouns male and female. We're talking to the regular bell curve of people. Of course, there's people on opposite sides of the bell curve in different bodies, gender fluid, all these, it's all unique, it's all different. And we're speaking to like in the middle of the bell curve, because that's a real thing.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, the moral is, and Tess, yeah, come on in. Goddess Tess might join us for a minute.
Tess Camper?
Yes.
Oh,
Wouldn't that
yay.
be, wouldn't that be
love her,
fun? Yeah. So
Great.
Tess, come on in. We'll stick around for a few more minutes. As I hear that, it just reminds me of how challenging it is to be a woman in our culture. It's really, really challenging. And yeah, there's hard stuff for men, but you know what? Just the whole safety issue itself, right? And so one thing to remember is that there's a lot more hyper-vigilant women out there than hyper-vigilant men, because there's a lot more women that were abused as children or as teenagers than men. Now, of course, there are men that have been abused and, grow up with a certain PTSD or a certain, hypervigilance. And I talk a lot about this because I've seen so often situations where one person in the couple is hypervigilant and the other person thinks they're crazy. What's wrong with you? Why are you such a bitch? Why do you freak out so quickly? How come you get so upset so easily? Oh my God, let's learn about their history. Let's learn about, how their father treated them or what happened to their childhood, where they grew up having to be constantly hypervigilant to make sure that they were safe. And so I see that a lot. And I guess just in terms of where we went for a minute here, I feel really sad that there's such a lack of safety in our world, and that so much of it is hidden. That so many people I love and care about had really, really horrific childhoods and weren't safe as children, or they weren't safe as teenagers and were raped or attacked or whatever it might have been. So.
Yeah, and men have their own challenge of not feeling safe to express their emotions, because they'll be looked upon as like sissies, and then they won't get the woman. So safety is a big one, I think, for all genders.
Absolutely.
I don't want to say both genders because there's more than one gender in our Tess. Oh, speaking of pretty, hi.
Hey, Tess. Let's unmute you so we can hear what you have to say. Hi.
How are you?
Good. It's really good to see you.
It's good to see you too. I was actually debating on my greatest act of self-love, and it was between you guys and a bath, and I thought I'd do both at the same time. but then I was like, I'm going to get really hot sitting in here for so long. So I took my bath and now I'm jumping in.
Great. So what stands out for you in terms of what we've been talking about today? Anything that stands out for you? Any inspirations you wish to share? Tess, by the way, is a longtime friend of both Roxy and myself. Lives down in San Diego. A brilliant woman, brilliant artist. What's alive for you, Tess? What have you heard today that's inspired you?
Well, I didn't catch very much of it. So what's alive for me and where I am, and probably likely will dovetail into what y'all are talking about, is that, one thing struck me a few days ago, and that was realizing that I really have never been taken care of in my life. So like, you know, my parents they took care of my body in terms of feeding me and dressing me and giving me values, but they weren't really present with me. And so, I had to take care of myself. And in the situation that I'm in right now, I realized that I'm the man in my life. And I've pretty much always been the man in my life, even in my relationships. And it's like, whoa, well, no wonder I really haven't had the relationship that I have felt completely met at, and where I can be more in my feminine, which feels less of a strain on me and more organically natural, but it's kind of a matter of finding it. And so today I had this insight about, you know, really being taught that, that taking care of myself is selfish, and that it's noble to be self-sacrificing. So when I am really looking at how do I take care of myself and give myself what I want, there's so much guilt in there that, and so look, well, how has that played out in my life? Well, the way that's played out is that I've been so used to accommodating other people. So there's this overgiving aspect, which, as I'm listening to you two talk about boundaries, I have violated my own boundaries over and over and over and over and over again, because I thought if I didn't, then I wouldn't get the love that I was needing so much. And it's like, okay, how do I unwind all this? How do I recover from this so that I can be, that we don't, because what I find happens is that when I have a realization like this, I want to go so far in the other direction,
Right.
completely isolate myself and build a, you know, be in an ivory tower. And then it's like really lonely there. And then how do you get out? You know, how do you get out and really start reconnecting with people when you've retreated so far into, no, I really got to figure out how to take care of myself, but I still want touch and I still want love and hugs and, you know, the whole thing. So it's an interesting thing to navigate. But I heard you say something earlier about women becoming so sensitive if men are overstepping their boundaries. And I wanted to add that I find that to be true of sensitive men too.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll say one thing and then turn over to my partner, Roxy, here. I just want to give you empathy for the courage to look at that, and to, you know, my favorite motto is, you know, Tess, how perfectly human, how perfectly human. And what you're describing is really common in our culture, where a lot of women are having to be very masculine and take on a lot of traditional masculine roles. And then the men in their world, you know, well, how come you're not more ladylike? How come you can't be more feminine, right? It's like, well, let's see, I've got a job. I'm taking care of 3 kids. I'm, you know, I'm the one who's managing the money, whatever it is. Like, so much that women are doing that is a traditional masculine role. And so I just want to give you empathy and understanding for that.
Thank
and
you.
how hard that is. Yeah.
Yeah, because especially being smart, and being valued for being smart, and so wanting and needing to be taken out of my head, you know. So that becomes a trick, because first you have to feel safe, right? You have to feel safe.
What are your thoughts, Roxy?
I'm just feeling I'm feeling the gratitude that I have right now for my upbringing, and feeling so taken care of by my mother, who was a single mom, who was in this incredibly male-driven world, and she had to fend for herself and fight for herself. And so but she was so nurturing to us. And I'm just sitting in gratitude right now because I'm listening to the words that you said, Tess, about, you know, your parents took care of your body, but that nurturing, like that deep self-care nurturing wasn't shown to you or like really, really given to you. And like I'm having empathy for that and just wishing everybody got the kind of nurturing and love that I got. And I'm just feeling I'm just grateful. I'm feeling real grateful. And I'm loving the thought of you getting more of that. Yeah. And being more in your feminine and your self-care and just allowing yourself to be softer. Because I experience you as this super feminine, beautiful woman. And I'm hesitant to say like I don't want you, I'm looking forward to you getting your needs met by a man. Because that just sounds like such a cliche, non-responsible way to look at it, but something, I don't know how to articulate that. I guess it's you stepping into this thing that I already see that you are, and attracting like the perfect honeybee for that kind of nectar that you have to offer.
Thank you. Thank you. Well, I mean, we're speaking subtleties at this point because it's like, I know that on the spectrum, I would be considered more at the feminine end of things. And still I can feel the strain in me of how much I function in my masculine, like how much my mind is engaged. And that's the piece. It's like, you know, using sense memory to like, okay, well, I know what it feels like, you know, to after like a really excellent bout of making love, and how soft I am and my mind is disengaged. And can I practice that? Can I sort of like move into that space just because I know what it feels like? And I do to a certain point, but it's really hard to maintain without reinforcement. So
yeah,
you know.
Yeah. And I appreciate you speaking into the subtlety of it, because it's like having a hair in your mouth. It's a small feeling, but once you get that hair out of the mouth, everything like can relax a little bit. And so I'm imagining, you know, when we attract people into our world, like, I mean, people can feel those little subtleties. We can feel those subtleties. And yeah, it's not like a big shift has to happen in your world. It's like one little notch over.
Right.
Because you already embody so much. And yeah, anyone looking at you from the outside would see this exquisitely feminine, beautiful person.
Absolutely.
When you
Total
open
goddess.
your mouth, and yeah, when you open your mouth, they hear this incredible, wise, intellectual person. And I think the fine-tuned person is picks up on what that thing is that you're talking about, that you want to like polish out a little bit.
Yeah, definitely.
Thank you for joining us. I am going to wrap this up. To be honest, I am famished.
Sure.
Veronica Monet just sent me a text message saying how much she enjoyed meeting you, Roxy. And she wants to connect with you. So we're going to make that happen. Tess, thank you for joining us. Enjoy your bath.
Thank
Enjoy
you.
your
It was good.
bath.
No, I'm done. I did it already.
She already had it.
Oh, you had it. Got it.
That's why she's glowing.
Got it. And people are saying, God, I miss physical touch too. I miss hugs, you know. For those of us that are single, those of us that, you know, aren't with a partner, it's like, yeah, self-hugging, my puppy love. I want to thank everybody for watching. I also want to acknowledge that most people who watch my videos tend to watch the video replay. So hello, those of you watching the replay. And a reminder, tomorrow night is our big Saturday Night Live for the Global Peace Tribe. We've got amazing musicians. We've got speakers, John Gray, who are Men from Mars, Women from Venus. We've got an incredible, it's like a variety show. You got to check it out. So that's 7:30 tomorrow night. And you can find out all the details by going to my page on Facebook, or you can send me a Facebook private message. And Roxy, I love you. Thank you so much for giving us incredible quality time today. Thank you, Tess, for joining us. And again, we appreciate Veronica.
Well, I'm glad you're doing this. Your energy together is a lot of fun.
Yeah. I'm love partnering in this way with Roxy. It's really, really fun. So
thank you. And per usual, it's an honor and pleasure, Scott. Thank you. And thank you, Tess. It was super sweet to be with you here.
Yeah.
Here.
And thank you everybody for watching. A lot of kudos, by the way. You'll enjoy seeing the messages. Take care, everybody. Have a good evening. Have a good weekend. And